Good evening and welcome to the September 2nd, 2009 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order at this time. The first thing on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of August 19th, 2009 regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, I'll declare them approved as submitted. We have one item under the Gateway Design Overlay District tonight, that being the National Tire and Battery Final Design Review for 8,064 square feet on 1.37 acres, Zone Light Industrial and GDO 3, located along Robert Rose Drive, Rama del Roba, LLC developer. Ms. Logan, good evening. How are you? Good
evening. Thank you. If we could go to the screen, we're going to try to show the aerial photos and the site plans tonight so that our audience at home can view it. And so as we start tonight, the first item before you is a site plan for a National Tire and Battery located at the corner of North Thompson Lane and Robert Rose Drive. This is part of the Oaks development that has been one of the first developments located in the Gateway. The item before you tonight is currently going to be considered for final design review, and we considered the initial design review a couple of months ago, and then they had 3 variance requests that went to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which allowed for a couple of variances to our current GDO regulations. And these were approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals because this property had already started development and was in place, and the Oaks development began prior to the initiation and the enactment of the Gateway Design Overlay Districts. So therefore, those variance requests were received, and that was to allow the parking go right up to the doors in this area, which would allow for the ability to bring the parking right in, of course, and that's something that the Board of Zoning Appeals approved. The second item that was approved in the variance included a reduction in open space, and the third items that the Board of Zoning Appeals approved was the separation of the parking from the property line. As you can see, the property lines go right through certain parking areas that are already existing. And this item is in good order for design review tonight. We do have a representative here if you have questions. We also have a copy of the color board downstairs tonight if you would like to see that again. As a reminder, the predominant material on the building will be brick and stone. It is predominantly masonry, and the facade that will be facing Robert Rose, although not the technical front, has been designed to have a front appearance to the street. The landscaping plan is in good order, and we just would ask that that if you approve this tonight, that you subject to all staff conditions, including that Mr. Huddleston, who has been out on vacation this week, have an opportunity to review the final stormwater quality plan that has been submitted.
Any questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Ms. Logan, the BZA did deal with the 3 small items, or items?
Yes, sir, they did. They approved all of those unanimously, all 3 items.
Thank you.
Does the representative of the Oaks development wish to make any statements? This is a first. If there's no questions or other comments, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries.
And that's subject to all
staff comments.
Subject to all staff comments.
Section number 5 of our agenda this evening is plats and plans. We have 3 items under plats and plans, the first of which is Cathy Property, Section 3, a preliminary plat for 9 lots on 9.87 acres zone commercial highway and RS-15 located along Agri Park Drive. Abundant Life Christian Church is the developer. Ms. Logan?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This preliminary plat for a 9-lot commercial subdivision is located along the western portion of Agri Park Drive, just south of the new county property development that contains the new farmers market and Agri Park area that they've been developing. This property before you tonight is pending the approval through the final approval of the City Council of the pending rezoning. Currently, they have sought a rezoning for a portion of this property from RS-15 to CH, Commercial Highway. That has been to the City Council and has been approved on first reading and has already had a public hearing. So that is, any of these approvals tonight will be subject upon that final review and approval by the City Council. This preliminary plat is in fairly good order. However, again, with the stormwater quality, they have tried to amend and change the stormwater quality to design to meet our ordinance, and we received that this week on our resubmittals, and Mr. Huddleston has not had an opportunity to review that, and that we ask that tonight any approvals be subject to final review and the design of those stormwater quality design changes that have been implemented on this plan that's before you. Also, I would like to note that this section is Section 3. You have reviewed another section previously just north of this property. If we could go to the screen. To the computer, I'm sorry. The property that's directly north here has been reviewed for you for Section 1 approval of preliminary plats, but no construction work has begun. There are certain elements that were shown in Section 1 that needed to be constructed for the drainage design for this section to be functional. So the way that we would like to handle that is that either those portions of Section 1 that have to be constructed must be constructed prior to this section being constructed, or revised construction plans will need to be submitted to staff, reviewed and approved, showing those elements of the drainage design in Section 1 that is necessary for Section 3 to be implemented as part of Section 3. So we just want to make sure that we got that in place, because there are some items there in that certain section that must be functional prior to us giving any building permits or CFOs on these lots specifically. And we just want to make sure that we had an opportunity to get that into the record. Other than that, we have no further comments. Mr. Adelot.
I do have some I want to add. This property is subject to a special assessment on the road. The developers are helping to offset a portion of the cost of the construction of the Agri-Park Drive. And I wanted to kind of make a mention of that, because that's one reason why this property is presently available for development. The assessment will come to you when they start selling the property, so that's something that I think the owner is aware of. Also, if there are any platting irregularities, this plat is intended to take care of them. And that will come along with this, these comments will go along with the final plat as well.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval subject to all staff comments.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. The motion carries. The next item is the same property but a final plat. The Caffey property, Section 3, a final plat of 9 lots on 9.87 acres on Commercial Highway and RS-15, located along Agri-Park Drive. Once again, Abundant Life Christian Church is the developer. Ms. Logan.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is the final plat for the preliminary plat, which we just reviewed. And if we could go to the computer, I took the plat off so you could see just the aerial photography. But as you can tell, it's located along Agri-Park Drive, between Agri-Park Drive and Gresham Lane. I'm going to go ahead and put that back up. And as we move through, again, we would just ask that the same comments that were discussed as part of the preliminary plat be conditioned in this final plat approval. And we also I'd also like to incorporate Mr. Adelot's comment about the road assessment, and would like to make one final note that until the rezoning is approved by the City Council and it becomes effective, this plat cannot be recorded as is, because it's showing it as being commercial property, which that's currently pending at this time. If they wanted to come and record it before that zoning, they would have to come back with a plat that showed RS-15. So just wanted to make sure that we were all aware that we cannot record this plat until that final approval has been granted by the City Council.
Any questions? There's no questions. We're ready for a motion. Subject to staff comments, please.
Chairman, I move for approval subject to all staff comments.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. The final item under plats and plans is the Oliver subdivision, lots 6 and 7, a re-subdivision plat for 2 lots on 5.85 acres, zone light industrial and GDO 3, and the mandatory referral for the abandonment of a public drainage easement. Zip Properties LLC is the developer. Ms. Logan?
Yes, sir. If we could go to the computer. This property is located at the corner of Medical Center Parkway and Thompson Lane, there at the northwest corner. If you go by there right now, you'll see that grading has begun on the property, and this plat is necessary to dedicate some right-of-way for sidewalks located there along Thompson Lane. A couple of comments that we would like to put into the record concerning the plat is that this will be conditioned upon an access easement agreement being resolved prior to the recording of the plat. If you'll recall, when we reviewed the site plans for this property, that they share access, and that the Walgreens property does have a right-in, right-out onto Medical Center Parkway, but that's the only individual access point that they really have, and we wanted to make sure that we work those access easements out before this plat is recorded. They are probably looking at just doing a reciprocal access easement on the entire site, but we will have their staff and our attorneys resolve that prior to this plat being recorded, as well as there's also shared landscape yards between lots 6 and 7, and that landscape easement agreement will need to be recorded in accordance with our landscape ordinance as well. Also, we combined the two items into one tonight by putting the plat and the mandatory referral together. Part of this plat is changing drainage easements and allocating new areas for drainage easements, but in doing so, there's also portions of existing drainage easements that are being abandoned. They're located on the plat PDE to be abandoned, and so that requires a mandatory referral. So we ask that you approve that mandatory referral tonight to abandon those existing drainage easements as part of your approval for this final plat.
Is there anything that's not an easement on this one?
Not much.
About as much as that's not filled. Any other questions or comments? No, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval, subject to all staff comments, and particularly also to move for the mandatory referral for the abandonment of public drainage easement.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Logan. The next item is new business. We have one item under new business this evening. That's a zoning request located along Gresham Park Drive, 12.96 acres from Office General to Commercial Highway, 5.54 acres from RS-15 to Commercial Highway, 11.62 acres from GDO-2 to GDO-1, to remove 11.62 acres from the Battlefield Protection District, and to consider changes to the Wilkinson Pike buffer. Mr. Tommy Smith is the applicant on behalf of Mr. C.M. Gatton. Ms. Ely, after saying all that, I don't know if I could say it again, so
That's
welcome.
okay. I'll go through this item. The request you have before you is for property, which is one parcel located south of Wilkinson Pike and north of Medical Center Parkway. This one parcel is dissected by Gresham Park Drive. The parcels to the south are Zone CH, Highway Commercial District, and is location of the city's convention center and of the Avenue Shopping Center. These properties are within the let me make sure. I don't want to. Okay. GDO-2 districts and GDO-1, sorry, I need to read my staff comments, I guess, rather than just saying it, are within the GDO-1 district. Properties to the east are Zone OG and RS-15. Although the zoning would permit offices and single-family residential uses, staff expects that they will not develop as such in the future. As a matter of fact, the Planning Commission has reviewed a master plan for the area that shows a mixture of uses for this area, and that would be multifamily, residential uses, offices, and commercial uses. The property just to the west is the Rutherford County building, which you may remember is the new location of the Chamber of Commerce. That item came before you last year, in 2008, and those of you on the BZA may remember it as well because it came before you and requested many variances. And if you do recall that, then you will be familiar with the items that I'm about to go through that the applicant's requesting. The property currently has several zonings. It's currently zoned OG, which is General Office District, RS-15, which is for single-family purposes, and this property in the orange is also zoned OG, and a portion of it is zoned CH, Highway Commercial District. The applicant is requesting that you rezone the property to all one base zone. So rezone 12.96 acres, which is the orange area, from its current OG zone to CH. Rezone the blue area, which is 5.54 acres, from RS-15 to CH, and leave the property that's zoned CH. The property, Shane, we put the second board up? Also has two different overlay zones on it, GDO1 and GDO2. And this board shows you the location of the Gateway Design Overlay District Overlay 1, which you will see is where the avenues and the conference center are. And it also shows the location of GDO2, which is the undeveloped property on the north side of Medical Center Parkway. The applicant's requesting that you rezone 11.62 acres from GDO2 to GDO1. The property is also in the Battlefield Protection District, which is the area that's hatched on this board. So if you see that, you'll see that this property has several different zones, and so what the applicant is requesting to do is basically 5 parts. First, to rezone 12.96 acres from OG to CH. Secondly, to rezone 5.54 acres from RS-15 to CH. Third, you'd like to rezone 11.62 acres from GDO2 to GDO1. Fourth, he'd like to remove the BPD zone from the property. And last, there may be a possible text amendment to remove the Wilkinson Pike buffer requirement. Sorry, that was a mouthful. Items 1 and 2 are basically just to clean up the zoning line on the property. Items 1 or 2 are the first and second one that I mentioned, which are to zone the properties to CH. He'd like to be able to plan for this property with one base zone instead of having the possible confusion of having 3 different zones on one parcel. The third item is, and the fourth item, the third is to rezone it from GDO2 to GDO1, is basically to have one overlay district over the parcel. So again, that would eliminate any potential confusion that there may be with what requirements, what part of the property needs to meet GDO1 requirements, what part needs to meet GDO2 requirements. The applicant has requested that you change it to GDO1 to allow the property to develop similarly to that which is on the south side of Medical Center Parkway. The GDO1 allows a variety of maximum building heights, 75 feet maximum for commercial buildings and 150 feet for office or hotel uses if there's own planned development. The GDO2 only allows a maximum height of 35 feet, and that stipulation remains no matter what the base zoning is, although the GDO1 would allow a variety. Also, the applicants requested to have the BPD removed because the BPD also limits height at 35 feet. If you remember, the Chamber of Commerce also got a 31-foot variance from the BZA to allow the building to be 31 feet higher than what the maximum height is allowed in the GDO, which is currently zoned. The fifth item, which I mentioned may be a possible text amendment to remove the Wilkinson Pike buffer requirement, comes as a result of the applicant's request that this buffer may no longer be needed. And this third board shows you the location of GDO2, which is the hatched area, GDO1, which is the stippled area, and then this purple area is the area which the applicant is requesting to be removed from the Wilkinson Pike buffer, which is 100 feet from Wilkinson Pike. The blue area is the area that's on the adjacent property, which is also in the Wilkinson Pike buffer area. If you'll remember, the Chamber of Commerce also got several variances from that buffer requirement to build or to get approval for the construction of their property. So the map shows you the 100-foot buffer, which the applicant's asking for some relief. It's the applicant's belief that the circumstances which motivated the city to adopt this buffer are no longer applicable to the property. We did want to note that just to the north, those houses were damaged in the April 10th tornado, and if the cable department will put the overhead up on the computer, not the laptop overhead, but the overhead that is on the machine, there's an aerial photograph which shows the damage after the April 10th tornado. This was included in your agenda materials, and I'm going to point out the property that we are considering this zoning change. You can see that it's dissected right down the middle with Gresham Park Drive. And the houses that are to the north were damaged in that tornado. Staff has become aware that that not all those houses are being rebuilt, but that the applicants are actively marketing and their property to be sold at commercial rates, maybe with some potential commercial development in the future. That changes the situation just a bit, knowing that those properties may not always be single-family homes, but may be some sort of commercial development in the future. Also included in your agenda materials are some photographs that I took when I went out to the site of the area. Also in your agenda materials are some photographs of the property, which is requesting this zoning change. I have included in your staff comments the section of the zoning ordinance, which is Section 24, Article 3, C6B, which is verbatim from the zoning ordinance, and it regards the Wilkinson Pike, formerly Manson Pike buffer. And as you've had time to look that over, staff is presented, or would like for you to give us some guidance, and we think that it would fall into one of the four following categories. The Planning Commission's alternatives could be to consider no change to the zoning regulations regarding this Wilkinson Pike buffer. The Planning Commission could amend Section 24, Article 3, C6B of the zoning ordinance, which is what I included above the text, by deleting the subsection in its entirety so that there is no longer any Wilkinson Pike buffer provision in the GDO regulations. This option would also remove the buffer from the Chamber of Commerce site. The third option that the Planning Commission has regarding this item is to amend this article by changing the word Medical Center Parkway to West Park Drive, so that the buffer will only apply to the portion of Wilkinson Pike east of West Park Drive over to Van Cleve Lane. This option would also remove the buffer from the Chamber of Commerce site. And the last option would be to consider changing the 100-foot buffer to some lesser dimension, perhaps 25 feet or whatever the Planning Commission would see appropriate. Each of these changes would require a text amendment to the zoning ordinance and would require a public hearing separate from the one that we would like you to schedule tonight regarding the zoning change to CH and the rezoning from GDO2 to GDO1 and the removal of BPD, which is, I know, a lot to say. But the Planning Commission should discuss these alternatives and provide staff with guidance as where you would like us to move. But we would like to ask for you to schedule a public hearing to consider rezoning the property and then give us guidance regarding the Wilkinson Pike buffer and maybe schedule a public hearing regarding amendments to the text regarding that buffer. Matt Taylor is here this evening. Do you have any comments, Matt? He doesn't have any further comments, but he would love to answer any questions that you have, as he likes to stand before you. If you have any questions from me or Mr. Alott, we'll be glad to answer them for you. And I think that maybe Mr. Alott has some additional comments he'd like to provide you.
As you can see, this is a little more complicated than your typical rezoning. And there are some issues here that are maybe a little bit greater than your typical zoning application. This situation is brought to us in a little bit because we now have an evolving commercial development out there that has shown us what good development can be. I think we're all very proud of the manner in which the conference center and the avenues has begun to develop, and I think we're all going to be very, very proud of the new Chamber of Commerce site that's fixed to be construction just any day. It's going to show us, and it's going to show our community the way good development should be done, and I think that's been obvious as we went through the design review process. Part of what has happened with the April 10th tornado, a row of houses that were viable, where people lived, people called home, that showed a residential face, have been destroyed, literally, quite literally. And as those property owners have begun to make their decisions what to do, some of them have decided that they may not want to build back there. And as a result, this property is in a different situation, where before we had a Wilkinson Pike buffer of 100 foot to offer those houses, that neighborhood, those homes, protection from an unknown quality of commercial development, because when we developed the Wilkinson Pike buffer, we didn't know what the first building was going to look like. Those houses were going to be protected by that buffer. Well, now those houses are going to be gone. And now I'm in an awkward situation of having to envision how are we going to protect this nice development we've seen in our Chamber of Commerce site from that development on the other side of the road that may come. And in fact, I want to initiate maybe some discussion about annexation of that property at some point. When I begin to receive multiple inquiries from realtors about annexation and zoning for it, I begin to get a little concerned, because that property is not currently within our city and is not currently within our jurisdiction to have any oversight for redevelopment. So there are some aspects to this that are a little bit greater than your typical situation. Number one, Mr. Smith is in this process of trying to market the property. The tornado did change the circumstances. That's usually one of the things you want to look at with a rezoning. It reshuffled the deck. So what would previously may have needed to be a buffer zone, and there may need to still be one, but if that area over there redevelops and it's something other than residential, we may have burdened this property a little bit more. So he's asking that the property be commercial highway, that we change the GDO1 to the GDO2 to GDO1. We may want to do that for the chamber site as well, although the point's moot since they've already got their variances. He also wants to remove the Battlefield Protection District. The Battlefield Protection Overlay District is a little bit redundant at that point. The only thing that it does that the GDO well, it does everything, but nothing more than GDO. So relieving this property of the BP overlay doesn't do anything except for allow for a little bit of tolerability. Also, the Wilkerson Pike buffer, and I think we need to discuss that. My belief is with West Park, and West Park is this street right here, goes into the subdivision. This lot is vacant, it's undeveloped. This lot right here may have a house being rebuilt on it, but these right here are pretty much gone, and I don't think we'll see houses return. And I have talked with some of those property owners that while they have some uncertainty as to what their future holds, they have a lot of reservations about the prospect of building back there. And they're looking to market their property for commercial purposes. So I think we need to discuss that. I think that we need to, first of all, maybe discuss the zoning part, but then about the Wilkerson Pike buffer. And that's written into the text. It's not really a zoning district. I'm glad to answer your questions.
Questions from Mr. Adelot?
Mr. Adelot, on the other side of Wilkerson Pike, where the houses have been destroyed, has there been some information from the owners as to what zoning they would prefer? I mean, we have various commercial zones, so,
I spoke
and appropriate.
with one of them in particular. He says he would prefer to sell it to someone, and they could approach the city or the county with whatever their plans were. But he is going to demand a commercial price that's going to be comparable to what's happening in the avenues or in the conference center and the area.
Well, Mr. Adelot, how many private residential lots are there?
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This one's undeveloped, so that leaves 8 that once upon a time had structures upon them. Of that, I believe 7 of them were totally destroyed, and it is very unfortunate. Mm-hmm. I mean no humor if I chuckle with it. It's not intended, because it is tragic what happened out there, because that was ground zero of the tornado that came through our community, and it totally demolished those homes and have had a huge impact upon those people's lives.
State law, I see they're going from different zonings to commercial highway. That's their proposal. Is that still subject to an overlay in that area?
We absolutely intend to keep the GDO1, which is the same as the Embassy Suites, the same as the conference center, and the avenues.
So we'll bulk zone it and keep an overlay over it?
Absolutely. We intend for it to be an overlay, come what may. And in fact, Mr. Wilson, it occurs to me that if and when we annex property across on the north side of Wilson Pike, we would want to put it in an overlay district as well. We have already identified, although this property is not currently in the city, that's the Williamson property, that we would want it in there. But at the time we were developing the GDO regulations, we never envisioned that these houses would be demolished as they are. It just never occurred to us that we would be looking at that possibility.
Any other questions? We need to schedule public hearings.
Yes, sir, we do. And that would be on the base request to rezone the property, and that'd be 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the items for public hearings. And then after you all have taken action on that request, I'm going to come back to the Wilkerson Pike buffer and decide how we might want to approach that, if at all.
Can we have that ready by October 7th?
Yes.
Absolutely, no problem.
Any other questions or comments? If not, we're ready for a motion to set a public hearing.
Move the public hearing be set October 7.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Adela.
With regards to the Wilkerson Pipe buffer, the 100-foot buffer is, in the text of what the buffer requires, is in the staff comments, verbatim from the zone ordinance. It's very demanding, but the purpose for it is gone unless there are going to be a viable homes there. So what would be the Plan Commission's desire? I'm going to be very frank with you. I just as soon see it completely removed. Back to West Park Drive. I think that would be probably the most logical thing to this point right here and align it right there, because what would be directly across the road, it's intended to protect the residential across the road. Now, if we have a public hearing and we decide that we want to do something, we can always back up on that, but we will have it advertised for the maximum of what we see today, and then we can come back to do something else. Also, if we decide after a public hearing that we want to study upon it some more, we can still do that, but we will have gained public input to see what's on people's minds.
And we can do that for October 7th as well.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that approach would be just to delete all of that subsection from the zone ordinance. That'd be subsection, Section 24, Article 3, C6B in its entirety. No, excuse me, that's not what I meant. It's not deleting it in its entirety, but to replace the words. Let me go back. That would be option number 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be to change the word Medical Center Parkway to West Park Drive. That's what I meant to say. It's deleting it to the west of West Park Drive.
Just like Ms. Ely said earlier.
Yes, please.
If there's no questions or comments, we're ready for a motion.
Make a motion, we set a public hearing for October 7th.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Before we leave this subject entirely, we have made the motion. I want to discuss this issue of land use there. We've got a few minutes. We're not in a big hurry tonight. We don't have a lot of public hearings. What is it the Plan Commission wants to begin thinking about? Do we want to think about the issue of annexation over there? I'm confident that the owners would just as soon wait until they had a buyer ready to do something. But I know one thing about annexation well, I've had many years of annexation experience that they've not. And what will happen is when they get a buyer, he's ready right then, and they are too, and they can't happen quick enough. And annexation takes 120 days plus. I would just as soon maybe begin the study process, and we may have public hearings to study and decide maybe it's premature and we'll hold up. But I would think maybe we ought to do maybe a little bit of for lack of a better word, a reconnaissance report to kind of take a look at what's out there, our capabilities, providing services, and report back to the Planning Commission maybe next meeting to see if we want to pursue that. Certainly we'd have a public hearing before we made any kind of recommendation.
Well, it'd be beneficial for any homeowner there currently or any prospective land developer to know what kind of zoning that the city is leaning toward in that regard. This is not part of the was this part of the Blackman Overlay
sir,
District?
it
was
is not.
Was it? So we have no template to go by pertaining to the zoning that we'd like to have there. So I think you're absolutely right. We need to go ahead and start the process so we can be talking about it and try to come up with a zoning that would be appropriate rather than reacting at a later time to something that may be coming along down the pike and having a developer that may be wanting to put something in there that we are not going to feel is appropriate for that area, since it does back up to residential property.
It would be shocking to me and to our community if we woke up one day and saw on the Plan Commission agenda for Rutherford County a site plan or a zoning application for something that was not consistent with the quality of the gateway as we've been working on it. And it would be very shocking, and we would be in a very awkward situation of trying to get ahead of the curve. And if we do our homework now, we can keep ourselves from being in that situation. And I can think of some instances in the past where I wished I had been a little bit more foresightful and had gotten ahead instead of having to play catch-up.
Proactive. Ms. Jones?
Mr. Adelot, are we talking about the 9 lots, or are we talking about a larger area?
You know, when we do a reconnaissance, and I'm using that word just basically as the idea of staff is going to evaluate and study, take a look at service capabilities, what has potential and such. I would probably look into this area with our first
That's
report,
what I was going to suggest.
pretty much in the area that was torn out by the tornado, and then come back and we would refine from there. There'd be no public hearing because we wouldn't be at the public hearing stage yet. We're really going to be gathering information to find out about our capability of providing services, sewer, maybe begin to see what might make sense to do. And then we'll bring it back for study with the Planning Commission.
That's what I think, West Park Drive and over to both lots, front and back. And
I'm
may end
not
up
familiar with the
leaving
street name.
some of those in, but, These on West Park, I don't know if they're rebuilding or not. Okay.
Sounds like a good plan.
And while we're at it, you know, we may study the appropriate zoning, and, well, we would study the appropriate zoning, but also buffering that might be added. We may be looking at a redefinition of where a Wilkerson Pike buffer ought to go in there, you know,
Right.
if we're going to be looking at it.
Right, because these lots might turn into deep lots that maybe the 100-foot buffer needs to come back here on the back road instead of the...
Any of the houses that are not fronting on Wilkinson Pike, fronting on that back street behind West Park in there, some of those were destroyed as well. Yes. Are they pretty much being rebuilt, or some of those are still unbuilt?
Some of those are still unbuilt. I think there may be a little bit more effort being placed towards seeing a reconstruction on some of them. Some of the people's circumstances may be that they're wanting to, but just haven't been able to get to where it takes. The insurance settlements, the ability to hire a builder, or all it takes to get back their lives. So I'm not sure their intentions, and some of it you can see, some of it you can't.
Okay. So we don't need to set a public hearing on that. We just need to go ahead and give you the guidance that we want to go ahead and proceed with the study.
Yes.
Okay. Would you like a motion to that effect?
I would appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we proceed with a study of potential annexation of the area between West Park Drive and Wilkinson Pike and that back road right there.
What is that street, Mr. Adelot?
I don't know the name of it. The mystery street that's obscured by the
Okay.
But that area
label.
being pointed out by Mr. Adelot.
Thank you. Motion is made, I think.
Kind of.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Any other comments about this, Mr. Adelot?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. Seeley, thank you. That concludes the new business tonight. We have one item under mandatory referral, that being a land acquisition adjacent to Butler Drive Substation, north of Butler Drive, City of Murfreesboro. Is the applicant Mr. Ives?
Yes, sir. Thank
Good
you,
evening.
Chairman. Murfreesboro Electric has a substation off of Butler Drive. It's barely visible from the interstate, but it backs right up to it because of the foliage around in that area. They have need to expand that to the west by 50 feet. We have worked out an arrangement with the landowner to acquire 45 feet of property in fee simple and also a 5-foot drainage easement. And the reason we're acquiring 5 foot as a drainage easement is right now the drainage is a ditch in that area. Surface water drainage is by a ditch. The owner of that land may want to be bringing either a driveway or even a city street back into that area for future development. And if he does, he will need to use that, likely will need to use that 5 feet, and then we'll pipe our drainage. So we've reached an agreement that allows him the possibility of making a street or driveway back there if he protects our drainage interest. MED staff and I have worked this out, and we're ready to finalize it, and actually have reached an agreement with the landowners that's subject to the approval of the Planning Commission in terms of acquisition of this property, both the fee simple interest and the easement interest, and then final approval by City Council.
Any questions or comments of Mr. Ives? Mr. Adelot, do you have any comments? Okay. There's no comments or questions. We're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Final item is the staff reports and other business. One item under that on my agenda is a proposed Planning Commission meeting and submittal calendar for 2010. Mr. Adelot?
Yes, sir. Included with the agenda materials is a calendar for 2010 showing proposed meeting dates, submittal dates, and holidays. Staff prepares this calendar for the Planning Commission about this time each year. It's a very useful planning and coordinating tool so we can know where we need to be and when we need to be there. The Planning Commission typically will look at the calendar this time of year and then adopt it because we'll already be scheduling public hearings real soon into 2010. One of the things we usually do is try to look at the July 4th holiday because lots of times it falls on our first Wednesday night or close to it. In past years, we've had the opportunity to move that day around a little bit. This year, I'm proposing that we not make any adjustments to the public hearing. The public hearing date would be the 7th of July. I'm proposing that we not move it because if we do move it, we would not be able to get back on our regular schedule until October, and we would affect the Board of Zone Appeals regular meeting date as well. If we just said we just got to move it, I would rather move it up a week. But I'm ready to just leave it alone. And if we decide we would like to return to this sometime in April, we can.
Any comments from the Planning Commission?
If you like my calendar, and I'd like to credit Ms. Jaco. She put together a very compelling-looking calendar, and we'll make sure that once it's adopted, we'll get it out to all the people who do business with us, including board members, council members, and the engineers and realtors, people who are interested, and have it posted on our internet.
Do we have to move to approve this? Or we just...
I'd like to have a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the calendar as submitted.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Adelot, Ms. Jaco. Thank you for your work. Mr. Adelot, do you have anything else?
No, sir.
We need to thank Mr. Smith for coming for us tonight. We haven't seen him in a while. And Mr. Martin, too, as far as that goes. So.
We would like to see more of them.
Yes, we would.
We would.
It's been rather dull around here the last few months, Mr. Smith and Mr. Martin, so thank you for coming back.
In fairness to them, they brought to us some of the most exciting developments our community has seen, and we wish they would bring some more of them. We miss them.
If there's no further business, we stand adjourned. Mrs. Jones?